Okay, let's unpack this deep dive. Today we're trying to cut through some of the noise around the recent U.S. military strikes. These were on Iran's key nuclear sites, Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo. Pretty big deal.
Absolutely unprecedented, really.
Yeah. And we've got, a range of sources here, intel reports, expert analysis. Our goal really is just to pull out the important bits, help you understand what's happening in this critical moment in the Middle East.
Right. And what jumps out immediately from the sources isn't just, the expected tension. It's this paradox. These strikes, they were meant to cripple the program, but they might actually end up hardening Iran's resolve, maybe even speeding up the hidden parts of their program.
That's a really striking point. Because the U.S. military's language is very strong. They're talking extremely severe damage, even totally obliterated facilities.
Especially Fordo, yeah, the one buried deep in the mountain.
Exactly, needing those bunker busters. So you hear obliterated and you might think, okay, problem solved, right?
Well, far from it seems. And that's the key thing our sources are highlighting.
Yeah.
The physical damage, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But Iran's knowledge base, their 2 decades of what their foreign minister called hard-won knowledge, that's the real nuclear asset. And you just can't bomb knowledge away.
Right. That expertise isn't stored in a building.
Precisely. And intel reports are suggesting that Iran actually took steps before the strikes, moved enriched uranium. The amount needed for one weapon is surprisingly small, like bowling ball size apparently.
Yeah.
Easy to hide, easy to move.
Wow.
But the real challenge isn't just the material, it's that intellectual capital. They can likely rebuild, reconstitute the program much faster than people might think.
So the buildings might be rubble, but the know-how, the brain power, it's still there. That really shifts the perspective, doesn't it?
It fundamentally does.
So given that, this enduring knowledge, what does this mean for Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei? The sources describe him facing a profound strategic quandary. Some even call it a poison chalice. Why so difficult for him?
Well, it's a classic tightrope walk, isn't it? He has to respond somehow. For national pride, for his own legitimacy at home, especially after such a direct hit.
Sure, yeah, just ignore it.
Exactly. But if he responds too aggressively, he risks absolutely catastrophic retaliation. It could genuinely threaten the regime's survival. So the sources paint this picture of a lose-lose. Doing nothing looks weak, but hitting back hard could trigger something existential.
Okay, so if the stakes are that high, what military options does he realistically have?
Well, they seem severely limited. Direct attacks on U.S. bases, hugely risky, probably too risky, likely to invite overwhelming force.
Right.
And their network of regional proxies, that's been a key tool for them, but sources say it's been weakened or wiped out by Israeli actions over the last year and a half, 2 years.
So that lever is less effective now.
Much less. And even the old threat, closing the Strait of Hormuz, that could backfire badly. Alienate China, who buys their oil, disrupt global energy. It creates more problems than it solves, perhaps.
So military options look pretty constrained, pretty risky. What about the diplomatic route, then? Our sources hint Iran might try to underplay the damage publicly, while maybe engaging in drawn-out talks, possibly not entirely sincere ones. What's the thinking there?
Well, historically, Iran hasn't seen U.S. negotiation offers as genuine give and take. They often view them as demands for unconditional surrender.
I see.
They've been really clear, for instance, that demands about their ballistic missiles are an even deeper red line for them than the nuclear stuff. So there's this deep distrust. They might talk, but it might just be buying time or posturing unless the core demands shift significantly.
And after these strikes, what happens to Iran's actual nuclear path? Does this push them to, speed things up?
It certainly could. One possibility is they accelerate enrichment, try to rebuild faster. Or, and this is quite worrying, some sources suggest they could rush to develop a simpler form of nuclear weapon, a so-called dirty bomb.
Not a full nuclear explosion, but...
Exactly. Uses conventional explosives to spread radioactive material. It wouldn't level a city, but it would cause immense fear and disruption. Widespread contamination. It's a way to show teeth, maybe, without crossing the full nuclear threshold.
A terrifying prospect. Meanwhile, looking outside Iran, Israel is still pushing hard for maximum pressure, right? Some analysts think their goal isn't just stopping the bomb, but maybe complete destruction of the nuclear program or regime change.
That's definitely a viewpoint highlighted in the sources. And what's interesting is that Israel's strong conviction that Iran is absolutely bent on building a nuclear bomb, that assessment hasn't always been shared by past U.S. intelligence findings. There's a notable gap there.
That divergence is important.
It is. And while Israel clearly has influence on U.S. policy, other players, well, not so much. European nations are calling for urgent de-escalation, but the sources are pretty blunt. They have almost no influence on the U.S. right now.
And the Arab neighbors.
They're concerned, naturally,
Bro.
but also worried these strikes are taking focus away from the crisis in Gaza. It shows how complex the regional picture is. Everyone has different priorities.
So when you put it all together, you can see the path ahead is incredibly perilous. The core of Iran's nuclear capability, that knowledge, that expertise, it's still there. Diplomacy seems really strained, maybe even operating on different assumptions on each side.
Yeah.
The final direction this crisis takes, how it affects everyone in the region, it really hangs on the decisions leaders make in this very, very tense environment.
Which leaves us with a crucial question, really. Something for you to think about. What does it actually take to de-escalate? Especially when the most important nuclear asset isn't hardware, but decades of knowledge. And when, for one side at least, the ultimate red line is simply regime survival.